All right, so you know how we all walk around with a little Neanderthal DNA? It's kind of cool to think about, right? But what if I told you that the very basis of your DNA, like the actual system for coding your entire being, might have originated in space, maybe even before Earth existed? Kind of blows your mind, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting shift in how we think about the origins of life. That classic image of like fully formed life arriving on a comet, that's traditional panspermia. It's a captivating idea, but honestly, the scientific evidence for it is pretty thin. What we're diving into today is a bit more nuanced, and frankly, it has a lot more support. Pseudo-panspermia.
Right, exactly. So for you, our listeners, consider this your express lane to understanding this wild concept. We've been digging through all the latest research and discoveries, and we've pulled out the most important and, let's be honest, the coolest insights. Basically, we want to explore all the compelling evidence for a pseudo-panspermia, especially some really game-changing findings that have come out recently, so you'd be totally in the know without drowning in a sea of scientific jargon.
It's such a crucial discussion to have, especially when you think about this ongoing puzzle. Life appeared on Earth incredibly fast.
Yeah, it's crazy how quickly life popped up on our planet. We're talking just a few 100 million years after Earth cooled down enough. And actually, some early biosignatures suggest it might have been even earlier. And here's the kicker. This rapid emergence kind of throws a wrench into the idea that life just spontaneously arose from nothing right here on Earth.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, think about it. The jump from basic elements to a self-replicating cell, that's a monumental leap in complexity. It's hard to imagine natural selection working its magic that fast in such a short geological time frame. That's a big reason why scientists have been considering the possibility of some pretty significant contributions from beyond Earth.
Right, exactly. Now, we mentioned this earlier, but just to be super clear, we're not talking about like little green men hitching a ride on an asteroid. That's the old school panspermia, and, well, it's a fun thought experiment, but there's just not enough solid evidence.
I agree. That hypothesis has a few hurdles to overcome. The biggest one: how could even the simplest life forms survive interstellar travel? Think about it. Intense radiation, the vacuum of space, crazy temperature swings. And even if they did make it, how would they then take root on a completely new world? It's a tough sell.
Okay, so let's zero in on pseudopanspermia. What exactly is this idea that's gaining so much traction?
The basic idea is that instead of full-blown organisms, it was the building blocks of life, complex organic molecules that formed out in space and were delivered to early Earth. It's kind of like getting a cosmic IKEA kit for life, right?
A molecular delivery service from the universe. Now, that's an image. So if that's the case, then our earliest molecular ancestors on Earth didn't have to start from scratch. They had a major head start thanks to a little cosmic care package.
Exactly. If those building blocks, things like amino acids, nucleobases, and other crucial organic compounds, were already present on early Earth, delivered by that constant bombardment of meteorites and comets, it would have dramatically sped up the whole process of life getting started. It means you could go from basic molecules to self-replicating molecules and eventually to those first cells much, much faster. And as you said earlier, there's a ton of evidence supporting this idea, especially some really cool new discoveries we'll get to in a minute.
Okay, so let's get into the evidence. What were some of the first hints of this cosmic connection?
Well, one of the earliest and most influential pieces of evidence came from studying meteorites. Remember the Miller-Urey experiment back in 1952?
Yeah, of course. It's the one where they basically recreated the conditions of early Earth in a lab, right?
You got it. They built this sort of primordial atmosphere in a flask. Water, hydrogen, methane, ammonia, the works. Then they introduced electrical sparks to simulate lightning. And guess what? They spontaneously created amino acids. It was a huge breakthrough.
It was, wasn't it? That experiment showed that you can actually get those basic building blocks of life, amino acids, from simple inorganic materials if the conditions are right. I was like, hey, maybe the raw ingredients for life aren't so unique to Earth after all.
That's right. And that got scientists thinking, could these organic molecules form in space and then make their way to Earth? Now, fast forward to 1969. Something amazing happens. The Murchison meteorite falls in Australia.
I remember reading about that one. It's like a time capsule from space, isn't it?
It really is. So the Murchison meteorite is classified as a carbonaceous chondrite, meaning it's full of carbon, clay minerals, and water. But what made this meteorite really special was the incredible variety of organic molecules it contained. Scientists found over 90 different amino acids, and some of them are even found in Earth's biology. Plus, they found nucleobases purine and pyrimidine, which are, of course, those fundamental components of DNA and RNA. And on top of that, a bunch of other complex organic compounds. It's like the universe was making amino acids and parts of DNA before Earth was even a thing.
90 amino acids. That's crazy. We only use 20 in our bodies. And the fact that it had the building blocks of our genetic code, that's mind-blowing.
Absolutely. And here's another key point. They dated the Murchison meteorite to be around 7 billion years old. That's older than our entire solar system. So it means complex organic chemistry was already happening out in space long before Earth even existed.
So basically, those basic ingredients for life were already floating around in the cosmos before our planet even formed. That's incredible.
It definitely suggests that. And here's something else that supports an extraterrestrial origin for these molecules. Chirality. The amino acids in Murchison came in both left and right-handed forms, like mirror images of each other.
Okay, now remind me about chirality. Why is that so important?
So all life on Earth uses only left-handed amino acids. It's one of those weird quirks of biology. This preference probably happened very early in life's history, maybe even in our last universal common ancestor. Now, the fact that the amino acids in Murchison were both left and right-handed is a huge clue. It pretty much confirms they formed naturally in space through non-biological processes and weren't just contamination from Earth life after the meteorite landed, where only left-handed amino acids are used. It really supports that idea of pre-life formation in space.
That's really strong evidence. But as you mentioned before, there's always that question of contamination, right? Like, how do we know for sure that what we're seeing in these meteorites wasn't introduced after they landed on Earth?
You're right, contamination is always a concern. And that's where direct space sample return missions come into play. Over the years, there have been some incredible missions dedicated to collecting samples straight from asteroids and comets. NASA had the Stardust mission, which brought back dust from Comet Wild 2. Then there were Japan's Hayabusa and Hayabusa 2 missions. They actually landed on asteroids and brought back samples, which is amazing. And the European Space Agency had the Rosetta mission, which even sent a lander down to a comet to analyze it right there on the spot.
So basically, all these missions confirmed that these space rocks are full of organic compounds.
They did. And they added to that growing body of evidence showing that space is a pretty active place for prebiotic chemistry. But there was still a big question, just how far could this chemistry go in space? Could pseudo-panspermia really have given life on Earth such a big head start? And that brings us to, in my opinion, the most exciting development in this field recently. NASA's OSIRIS-REx mission.
Oh yeah, OSIRIS-REx, that name. Sometimes they call it the Transformer mission. You know, origin, spectral interpretation, resource identification, and security regolith explorer. It's quite a mouthful. And if I remember correctly, this mission targeted a carbonaceous asteroid called Bennu, right?
It definitely is a mouthful, but very descriptive. And you're right, the mission focused on Bennu. It's your pretty average, mid-sized carbonaceous asteroid, roughly 500 meters across. But here's what makes Bennu interesting. It's part of the Apollo group of asteroids, which means its orbit crosses paths with Earth's orbit. Now, don't worry, there's no immediate danger of Bennu hitting us, but it does come relatively close to Earth every 6 years or so. Plus, these Earth-crossing orbits make asteroids like this a lot easier to reach with robotic missions.
So OSIRIS-REx went all the way to Bennu, hung out for a bit, and actually grabbed a sample, right? It wasn't just a flyby observation.
Exactly. The spacecraft spent a couple of years carefully studying and mapping Bennu from orbit. Then, it did this really cool touch-and-go maneuver to collect a sample of its regolith, that loose, rocky material on the surface. Bennu's gravity is super weak, so getting away with the sample was a whole other challenge, but the spacecraft pulled it off perfectly. Then it started the long journey back home.
And that return journey was a little bit dramatic, to say the least. Wasn't there an issue with the parachute?
Yeah, there was a bit of a hiccup. When the sample capsule came screaming back into Earth's atmosphere in September 2023, the first parachute didn't deploy like it was supposed to. But thankfully, the backup parachute worked perfectly, and the precious cargo landed safe and sound right on target in the Utah desert. Phew! Since then, scientists have been carefully analyzing the sample in these super clean conditions, and just this past January, they published the first wave of results.
Okay, this is what I've been waiting for. What did they find? Spill the beans.
Well,
What did that Bennu sample reveal?
Well, the findings were absolutely groundbreaking. They give a huge boost to the pseudo-panspermia idea. Here's the big one. They definitively identified all 5 nucleobases that make up the code of DNA and RNA. This is the first time all 5 adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, and uracil have been found together on a single object from space.
Well, wait, all five. That's the whole set. That's massive. It's like finding the Rosetta Stone of life's origins.
It really is. The sample also contained a bunch of amino acids, 14 out of the 20 that life on Earth uses to build proteins. And just like with the Murchison meteorite, these amino acids had both left and right-handed chirality, which, again, points to a non-biological origin in space.
So even more proof that those essential building blocks were all over the early solar system. Anything else cool they found?
Oh, there's more. The Bennu sample was packed with ammonia about 12 times more than what they found in Murchison. Now, that's really interesting because where Bennu is now, in the inner solar system, it's way too warm for pure ammonia ice to hang around. That means Bennu must have formed somewhere much colder, way out in the solar system.
So like a cosmic deep freeze where these compounds could survive.
Exactly. And get this, they also found 11 different minerals that form when really salty water, like brine, evaporates. This tells us that Bennu, or at least the bigger object it came from, used to have pockets of liquid water with dissolved salts in it. In fact, the minerals in the sample showed a ton of evidence that Bennu had a long history of interacting with water. It's similar to what we see in water-altered meteorites here on Earth and in samples from other asteroids.
But there was something unique about the types of salts in Bennu, wasn't there?
There was. Unlike most meteorites we've studied, the Bennu sample had a lot of sodium-rich salts. Those aren't so common in meteorites, but we do find them on Earth in specific places, like Searles Lake in California. So that further supports the idea that Bennu had salty liquid water in its past. And the fact that these fragile, water-soluble salts were still intact in the Bennu sample shows how carefully they handled it. They kept it in a pure nitrogen atmosphere to prevent it from reacting with Earth's air.
So putting it all together, what's the story of Bennu? Where did it come from?
Okay, so based on all this evidence, here's the most likely scenario. Bennu started as a chunk of a much larger, water-rich protoplanet that formed out in the cold beyond Jupiter about 4.5 billion years ago. Inside this protoplanet, radioactive elements would have been decaying, generating enough heat to melt some of that primordial ice. This would have created underground reservoirs of mineral-rich water. And in these watery environments, well, that's where all the magic happened. Water would have reacted with things like ammonia and formaldehyde, creating a whole bunch of complex organic molecules, including those nucleobases and amino acids we've been talking about. Then, as the protoplanet cooled down, the water evaporated, leaving behind those unique brine-sourced minerals that we found in the Bennu sample.
Wow, so picture this. A little icy world way out in the early solar system just churning out the building blocks of life.
I know, it's amazing, right? But the story of this protoplanet doesn't end there. It probably had a pretty violent ending, colliding with another object and shattering into a bunch of pieces. Over time, those pieces clumped together and formed asteroids like Bennu. And because the early solar system was so chaotic, with giant planets moving around, Bennu's orbit would have changed over millions of years, eventually bringing it into the inner solar system and onto that Earth-crossing path it's on now.
Okay, so if Bennu, this seemingly ordinary asteroid, is packed with all these incredible organic compounds, what does that tell us about the rest of the cosmos?
It tells us that a lot of other asteroids and comets out there are probably also full of these organic molecules. And you have to remember that early Earth was bombarded by these things way more than it is today. They were probably a major source of Earth's early carbon, water, and of course these essential organic compounds. It really strengthens the idea of pseudo-panspermia. Life on Earth got a huge boost from those space-formed molecules that rained down on our young planet.
It really changes how we think about the origin of life, doesn't it? It wasn't just some one-off lucky event here on Earth. Those basic ingredients were probably all over the early solar system.
You got it. And this has enormous implications for the possibility of life beyond Earth. We're finding more and more evidence that suggests water worlds with tons of organic molecules, even the precursors to proteins and genetic material, might be a lot more common than we thought. It's getting harder and harder to say that simple life hasn't popped up in many other places across the universe.
And that fact that they found those DNA and RNA building blocks, those nucleobases, in Bennu, does that hint at some kind of fundamental, maybe even universal pathway for life to get started?
It's a truly profound question. If so many different planetary bodies across the universe start with a similar set of chemical building blocks, maybe there are only so many ways that life can arise. Maybe those pathways all involve DNA-like molecules because they're the most efficient way to store and copy biological information. It makes you wonder, could the very core of our genetic code, the DNA in your cells right now, have its roots in processes that happened billions of years ago on some distant, icy world?
It's crazy to think that something so fundamental to who we are might have started somewhere else in the solar system before Earth even finished forming. It really makes you think.
Absolutely. And speaking of OSIRIS-REx, its mission isn't actually finished. They've given it a new name, OSIRIS-APEX, and a new target, a potentially hazardous asteroid called Apophis.
Oh yeah, Apophis. Wasn't that the one that, for a while, people thought might actually hit Earth?
That's the one. The chance of an impact in 2036 is super low now, but it's still a pretty significant asteroid to keep an eye on. So OSIRIS-APEX is going to intercept Apophis after it makes a close pass by Earth in 2029. It's going to study any changes to the asteroid's surface caused by Earth's gravity. This will help us track Apophis more accurately in the future, and it'll also tell us how these close encounters can affect asteroids. That information could be really important for planetary defense, if we ever need to protect ourselves from an asteroid impact.
From studying the origins of life to protecting Earth from asteroids, that's quite a journey for one mission.
It really is. And it shows just how valuable space exploration is, both for understanding the universe and for keeping us safe here on Earth.
All right, so let's wrap this up for our listeners. This deep dive into the research has shown some really strong evidence for pseudo-panspermia. Those basic building blocks of life, including all 5 nucleobases needed for DNA and RNA, probably formed out in space and were delivered to early Earth. It basically gave life a huge head start.
And as we've talked about, this suggests that your very own DNA might have roots in extraterrestrial chemistry, going all the way back to that ancient water-rich world in the outer solar system. Pretty cool, right?
It is. It really is. So here's a final thought for you to ponder. If those basic molecules of life formed so readily in space and made their way to Earth, what else about life as we know it might have come from those unexpected cosmic origins? Think about what that means for our search for life beyond Earth and for understanding our place in this vast universe. Maybe the story of life is more intertwined with the cosmos than we ever imagined.